Welcome back to another deck tech video where I break down a deck and how it works. Today we'll be going over a newly printed commander for the first time, but before I do, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get into it. The card that I'll be covering today is the Mindskinner. It is a 3-mana 10-1 that can't be blocked. However, the cool part of this card is it says that if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent, prevent that damage, and each opponent mills that many cards. This is a super cool strategy that makes mill more obtainable as a strategy in Commander, and that's because it makes all of your opponents mill cards. So I really like this card. I think it's super interesting. That being said, I think it's abundantly clear that we're going to have to run cards that work well with mill, and two of the cards that I think are really cool are Fraying Sanity and Bruvak the Grandiloquent. Fraying Sanity is a curse that says enchanted player mills the amount of cards that were put into their graveyard this turn, so it's basically going to double all your mill, which is going to be really helpful and I think a good effect. And moving on to Bruvak, Bruvak literally says that they mill twice that many cards, so obviously a pretty good card to include. Another couple of cards that I would run to help mill your opponents are Psychic Corrosion, Sphinx's Tutelage, and Teferi's Tutelage. I really love these cards because they say whenever you draw a card, your opponents mill cards. All of these cards are going to help you with your strategy for doing something that you should already be doing, and that's drawing cards. This deck is mono blue, and what's mono blue known for? That's counter spells and being able to control the board, and so we're obviously going to run a couple of counter spells, but why not run the ones that are going to help us with our strategy and mill our opponents at the same time? These are going to be things like Didn't Say Please, Thought Collapse, and Countermand. These cards are not only going to help you control the board, they're also going to mill your opponents and help you get closer to your win con. And on top of that, what's a better feeling than a well-timed counterspell? Another couple of good cards that I think that will really help are Trepanation Blade and Fire Shrieker. Trepanation Blade will mill your opponents until they flip over a land, buff your creature, which will then cause your opponents to mill more. So it's a pretty good card because it not only mills them, but will cause them to mill more when you hit for damage. Fire Shrieker on the other hand is a lot more straightforward. It just straight up gives your creature double strike, which with your commander means double the mill. So I think that we, can understand that one. Now I think we've covered a lot of the basics, so I want to move on to some of the highlight cards in the deck. The first one I want to highlight is Mesmeric Orb. That is a card that mills your opponents every time they untap a permanent. This includes lands which they're going to need to try and beat you, so this is going to be a really good card for this deck. Another interesting card that I chose to include, because it's kind of like a double-edged sword thing, is Forced Fruition. Essentially, every time an opponent casts a spell, they have to draw 7 cards, so they're going to go through their deck super quickly, which is good for your win con, but it also gives them the ability to see a lot of cards, which isn't necessarily great. I personally like this card because it adds a little bit of a spice to the game, but some people wouldn't want the double-edged sword. Another fun card is Ankh of Mishra. This is a card that makes your opponents take 2 damage whenever they play land, and if you've been, paying attention, damage turns into mill, so every time that they play land, they're going to mill 2 cards with your commander. This is really cool. It's a little more conditional, but I think it's a cool include overall. And I think that's all you need to know to build this deck. As always, there's a link in the description. If you like the video, consider leaving a like, and for more Magic content, subscribe. That's all until next time, whether on this plane or another. Have a wonderful day.